Thank you. Thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it. We're looking forward to a good discussion, and I know that our members are going to have lots of questions. I'm going to just leap right into it, if that's okay, Minister. I'm going to start with you, and obviously if you have something to add, either of you have anything to add into those questions, please feel free. Minister, we were talking just a bit about the government's approach to modernizing government services, and you mentioned a digital strategy. Would you share a few details on that?
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. And I will just say, I brought up my sheet music here. I thought I was putting on a show today, but I guess we can talk tech. That's just as fun. So, yeah, so any of you who've been following what I've been doing in the last several years as a minister, you've heard me talk a lot about how technology is not just an industry, but it's the future of every industry. I think any of us in business can kind of see how technology has touched our industry and transformed it and made it really exciting. But what I also say is that should it not also be the future of government and how government delivers services to its citizens and how it operates and performs the functions behind the scenes of essentially governing on behalf of in our case, Albertans. I certainly believe that technology needs to be the future of government. But what we've all probably seen is that governments are a little bit slower to adopt technology and a little bit slower to find ways to apply technology to solve problems. And that's why you often have the frustration of having to wait in line at a registry to do something you could have done online, or having to fill out a mountain of paperwork for stuff that information you've already shared with the government once or twice or 10 times before, but you got to fill it all out again to do the next application or whatever it may be. We can all think of some point in time where we've interacted with a government, whether it's municipal, provincial, federal, and the experience was not a good user experience. And so for me, as a relatively new MLA and a relatively new minister who has a technology background, I thought, wow, what an enormous opportunity to start saying, we've got to be deliberate about this. And so I came up with this idea saying, well, we need to actually define and let's call it a digital strategy for lack of a better word, but let's define what do we mean when we say we're going to apply technology inside of government. Because I think all of us who've tried to modernize something at one point in our lives have found that there are some right ways and some wrong ways to do it. And I didn't want government to be reproducing the mistakes that we could learn from watching other folks who've been down that road before. So one of the advantages of being slow to get there is you can learn from everybody else who's been there before, and you can make up a lot of lost time. And so that's why we've been working on defining a roadmap for applying technology inside of government, with the goal ultimately of making sure that we are delivering better, faster, simpler services for all Albertans, but also then benefiting all taxpayers by saving them money and making all of government more effective, more efficient, more sustainable, so that we can meet the demands of all Albertans, even as our economy grows, even as our population grows, even as our population ages and our healthcare system becomes a little bit more challenging. Well, by applying more technology and innovation, we are going to be way better at everything we do, and all Albertans are going to benefit from seeing that happen.
Great. And maybe just quickly, Minister, is there a timeline that the project is under? Is there a public consultation, or is there a way that members could participate if they wanted to offer advice?
So we've been talking publicly about this for 3 or 4 years, and there's been a lot of consultation along the way. We've been working with folks from all aspects of the technology space, people who are really good at AI, people who are really good at data analytics, people who are really good at enterprise software, people who are really good at user interface design, and you name it, we've been talking to anyone we can find who's really good at what they do in those spaces, so that could help to inform what we're doing. This is also why I went to the United Kingdom and to Estonia and to Denmark last year to study. These were some countries who have really been leaders in modernizing government service delivery and applying technology. And each of them were really good at different things. And so we wanted to, again, if we're a little bit late to the game, we want to go to the leaders and say, what can we learn from them? What can we borrow from them, and make up for that lost time. And so a lot of that work over the last 2 or 3 years is what has informed the development of this digital strategy. I think, stay tuned, you're likely going to see a formal version of it very soon. But the good news is, all along the way, we have been applying those principles to bring more services online, to make it easier to interact with the government. If you've dealt with a registry anytime in the last couple of years, you've probably seen there's a whole lot more services online today than there were in 2019. And that's not by accident. It's because those were some low-hanging fruit opportunities to say, everybody's going to need to renew their driver's license. Everybody's got to renew their registration on their vehicle. Let's make it easier. Let's make it available 24/7 on your mobile phone so that you can do that in your pajamas on your couch on a weekend, instead of having to carve out time out of your busy day to deliberately go in person to a registry and wait in line to do it on paper. So the good news is we've been making a lot of progress in that regard. There's always more to do. But that's what makes it exciting, and that's what makes it a great opportunity. And I couldn't be more excited to be the minister leading that charge on behalf of the government of Alberta.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Rick, I want to ask you about how you see in your role as CEO, Alberta remaining competitive on the globally in the tech space. And I hope you take a moment to talk about Ben Combo and the great news that came out of that announcement.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to spend some time. Let me echo what the minister says a minute ago. Tech is an enabler. It's not a sector. And that's some of the work that I've been doing with our team, because we used to say, well, we're going after the tech sector. And we're way beyond that at this point. And Alberta actually has a rich history of being involved in tech. When you think of oil and gas, primarily that's a data science. It's about how do we explore, how do we move forward, and how do we do that. So when people say to me, Alberta didn't really do tech a few years ago, it's like, we do. And we've been doing it for a long time. We're actually quite good at it. But we haven't done a good job of telling that story and moving that forward. At the end of the day, it's the speed and ease with which we do business in this province that sets us apart from everyone else. I call it our secret sauce. From someone who moved from BC a few years ago to take on this role, it is amazing how the business community here embraces change, welcomes people, and that, at the end of the day, sets us apart from everywhere else. So the innovation we're doing is not about replacing oil and gas or agriculture, which are historical or are sectors, with anything else. It's building on top of what they have already done and moving them forward and help build our economy as we do that. For example, aerospace, an industry that when we started looking at it a couple of years ago, people were kind of like, Alberta, aerospace? There is an incredible amount of work done in this province already in aerospace to support the agriculture and the oil and gas industry. We just layered on the Haviland because that was a signature investment that helped us move that sector forward. So it's not a question of replacing, it's a question of building. And Eventco Combo, which we announced on Thursday, is a good example of that. It's an IT infrastructure company out of India. The CEO, we convinced him to move from Brooklyn, New York to Calgary and move his team here and move forward on building a whole infrastructure on events with 250 people to start with to move that sector forward. That is based on our work that we did earlier with emphasis to IT companies that came out of India a couple of years ago and started to invest in this province. They started out with a couple hundred people to kind of test and see how the ecosystem here works. Emphasis has already announced that they're going up to 1,500 people. Emphasis is not far behind. That is because they're actually finding there's lots of talent here, that we actually have a great pool of talent that people are attracted to. And at the end of the day, companies are attracted to two things. Is there a market for our product, which in North America there always is, and is there a talent pool that we can work with? And we actually have an amazing talent pool in this province. It's young, it's highly educated, and it's one that we can move forward with and attract a lot of business with. So we are going to continue to build this expertise that is already there, match it to the ecosystem that exists, and keep moving forward. Okay.
Thank you. Minister, wanted to ask you a bit about, there's so much in the news, AI and machine learning and the transformation that's taking place across sectors. Do you have some thoughts on where government is at on AI and where we're going in that field.
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and I think it's never been more on the forefront of our minds than in the last few months as we're seeing how tools like ChatGPT are just getting stronger and stronger. And I think probably if I were to ask, show of hands, who's used ChatGPT to automate something in your life at some point so far? That's pretty amazing, isn't it? I may or may not have used it to write the draft of a speech once. But I mean, like, hey, if there's a tool out there that can help you to save time, be more efficient, and be more precise, and make better informed decisions, isn't that a good thing? And so, so to me, I looked at that as an enormous opportunity, because in government, we're trying to solve problems all day long across so many different departments, and do it on things that touch everyday Albertans in every aspect of their lives. And I think about, one of the most successful investments I ever had as a VC before I got into politics, and it was a Calgary-based company. Some of you might know it. It's called Circle Cardiovascular Imaging, based right here downtown Calgary. And in 2010, they were about 10 people, and they were building some diagnostic imaging software for cardiologists and radiologists. And they were using AI and machine learning to build their models. And now today, they're over 100 people. They're still based in Calgary. Their software is being used in 1,500 hospitals in 45 countries around the world. It has completely transformed diagnostic imaging for cardiologists and radiologists, who are some of the most expensive specialists in healthcare. And so what does that mean? It means that more patients get access to better informed specialists who can give them better diagnostics faster and get them on a path to treatment and wellness. This is good for everybody. And the good news is it also created a lot of wealth for Calgarians, because that company just sold for $250 million last year. So for me, when I come into government and I say, well, that's my experience on the private sector side of what AI can do to solve a problem in healthcare. Well, there's thousands of problems that we need to solve every single day, and guess what? All of them require looking at data and making well-informed decisions, and AI can help us with almost all of them. And so my goal is to try and look for every opportunity to use AI productively inside of government. But one of the things I realize is, we don't have sort of an established, entrenched team of people who are data scientists, who are, real experts at using these tools. We might have a lot of people who are aware of the possibilities with AI and with these tools, but we don't have all the expertise in-house. And it will take us some time to build that. So I thought, well, what's something tangible that we can do right now to get some progress while we build that talent in-house? And so I came up with this idea of saying, let's build a lab, and we ended up calling it govlab.ai. And so we went out to industry and said, hey, if you're good at this, pitch us on this. What we want to do is, we as government are going to bring some resources, some dollars, some people, and we'll bring the problems into the lab. And we're looking for a partner in the private sector who's really good at solving problems with AI, like building real solutions, building real tools at a commercial level. And so we invited, through an RFP, a public RFP, a whole bunch of folks to come in and pitch us on that. And ultimately, it was Alta ML. Many of you might know Troy Jansen and Nicole Jansen and their team. They got offices in Edmonton, Calgary, and Toronto. And so they've partnered with us. They're bringing the senior level AI ML expertise. We're bringing the problems and a few extra dollars. And then we're partnering with MyTax to bring a bunch of post-secondary grads and students to come and work together in this lab to solve those problems. And it's just such a super exciting way for us to take real world problems, tie it with expertise that government doesn't have yet, but while we do it, we're building that expertise. And so this got off the ground a little over a year ago. It's something that is sort of funded by, and is a creature of my Department of Tech and Innovation. And I think it's going to open up the floodgates in terms of the kinds of problems we can solve inside of government, but also sends a signal to the world that Alberta is a serious place for technology entrepreneurs and innovators and researchers, and especially if you're in AI. Because if the government is using this, and industry is using this, then if this is a place that you want to be, if this is a career that you want to pursue as a new student or as an entrepreneur and an innovator, you know you can be successful in Alberta. And that's the story we're trying to tell all around the world. And that's part of why we're seeing so many people coming here and bringing their companies here. Just like Rick already said, there's so many folks choosing Alberta, and we're just getting started.
Awesome. And to build on that point, we did some great work with Emphasis here in town last year, and the Quantum Technology Center at the U of A, and bring those two parties together to move quantum technology, which is adjacent to AI, forward. And in the rest of the world, they look at those type of initiatives and they say, how do you do that? Because the rest, even other provinces in Canada can't deliver that piece of additional integration. So the government of Alberta is really far ahead compared to some other regions and states, even in the US, and it's a real competitive advantage that we try to leverage every day as we move things forward.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I mean, Alberta is a special place. We have a rich history of an entrepreneurial spirit, a can-do attitude, a get-her-done attitude, and that speaks to the technology roots and innovation roots that you talked about in our energy industry, right? Like, the reason why Alberta has a world-class energy industry is because people were innovative in how they developed their natural resources. They ran into problems and they found new ways to solve them. That's innovation at its core. And so we have that spirit deeply ingrained in the DNA of everybody here in Alberta. And as a government, that's what we're trying to bring to the table. As MLAs and as ministers and a premier, we're trying to make sure that we act with that can-do attitude, with that get-her-done spirit, with that entrepreneurial spirit, so that we can remove regulatory barriers wherever appropriate, that we can get approvals faster, we can give businesses and individuals certainty, so that when they're making decisions about where they want to put their capital to work, they know they can get to an answer, whether it's a yes or no quickly, and not waste their time spinning their wheels. And I think that's one of the things that people are recognizing when they're considering Alberta as a destination for their capital, as a place where they want to live and raise their families and start their business or start their career. And so we're just so excited as a government of Alberta to be telling that story all around the world and just making sure that we create those conditions so that when people get here, they realize there's no better place to be and they're going to be here for the rest of their lives.
That's great. Thank you both. Rick and Minister as well, one of the questions from one of our members is, what industries or types of businesses will foreign or international investors like to invest in Alberta? So as you're out there talking with some of these international companies, what are they looking for in Alberta?
Great question. So we find in general that we try to funnel them into one of 7 sectors because we can't be all things to all people. So our traditional heritage industries, energy and clean energy is of huge interest. We're attracting about 75% of the clean energy investment in Canada into Alberta. And most people don't realize that, so when we tell that story, that works really well. Food security has become a huge issue because of geopolitical considerations over the last few years. So any investment that we're doing into food and food services has been dramatic. This morning we announced a 400 million euro investment in paper and paper processing from a company in Europe that had been looking at replacing capacity that they lost in Russia as a result of the sanctions that happened over the last couple of years. So any product or manufacturing that allows you to access the North American market, Alberta is really well positioned to attract because we're stable, we're predictable. When you look down south, great country, but not stable or predictable these days. So we spend a lot of time working on that. Financial services, fintech, we're seeing a lot of demand from Asia in those particular sectors as well. And then aerospace, because of the de Havilland announcement, because of the amount of background we have, because of the agreement that we signed with WestJet last year as a government, is really starting to attract a lot of attention as well. So those are some of the main sectors that we focus on. Of course, any investor walks in the door and says they want to invest in Alberta. We don't say, I'm sorry, you don't fit our 7 sectors. That's not our style. Our style is we'll talk to anyone about anything and work it through. To give you an example, I was in Hong Kong before Christmas doing a fireside chat, similar to what we're doing here tonight. 250 investors from Hong Kong showed up a week before Christmas just to hear what Alberta had to offer. And we've got almost 750 files we're currently working on. So there's an incredibly high interest level right now. We just got to harvest with that, and that's really what my team is focused on.
Great, thank you. We have a question about whether or not government is looking at a program such as the Department of Energy, USDA loan guarantee and financing program. Thought about that sort of initiative?
Well, that's a little outside of my wheelhouse. It's certainly not something I'm focused on in my department, and so I would have to say that's a question I'd have to take away. I don't have the answer for that right now. I always say there's nothing worse than a politician who tries to pretend he knows the answer to a question. So I'm not even going to try and pretend on that one, but it's a good question. And if you can reach out to my chief of staff, Chris, whoever was asking that question, we can make an effort to, he's sitting over there, we can make an effort to try and connect you with the right minister to get you some background on that.
In general, we've pitched Alberta as a great place to start a business in, and a great place from a competitive perspective and a tax perspective, as well as a regulatory perspective with the red tape reduction that's happened over the last couple of years. We're trying to not get into these discussions of what loan or what guarantee program is there, because there are always provinces and states that will write bigger checks. So our general approach is we have an amazing business climate here, some of the lowest tax rates in North America. We want to play those advantages, and when we actually talk to business people and say, you know, subsidies, loans, grants, they all run out. At some point people go, yeah, I understand that. And also they got to be funded. So at the end of the day, if you're going to do a grant, you're going to do a loan, if government's going to pick winners and losers, then at the end of the day, you got to raise taxes, which is not the direction we've taken as a province. That really resonates with people as we start through those discussions. So that's one of the things that's working well as well.
Yeah, some really good points there, and it just sort of sparked a couple of thoughts just to add. Our approach as a government over the last 4.5 years has been to take a broad-based approach. Instead of saying we want only to develop incentives just for this industry or just for this company or just for this sector, you all heard it, right? Back in 2019 and in 2020 when we accelerated the job creation tax cut, where we took Alberta's corporate tax rate from 12% to 8%. We were originally planning to do that over 4 years. And we thought that was ambitious. But we thought, you know, this is a 33% reduction in corporate taxes. It's going to make us the lowest tax jurisdiction in Canada, one of the lowest in North America. For every industry, it doesn't matter what you do, you will be taxed lower than anywhere else. And that would make Alberta irresistible. And that was our theory. We thought, you know what, Alberta is in a jobs crisis. We need to create jobs. What better way to do it than to reward job creators who choose to call Alberta home and to motivate them to invest more, to grow. And then the pandemic hit. And everyone was saying, oh, are you going to walk that back? Because we won't make a decision to come and invest in Alberta until we know that this is a for sure thing. And so in 2020, we made a tough decision, but we said, you know what, we are going to guarantee this. In fact, we're going to make the full 4% cut to 8% permanent and make it happen right now. And people were crying, you know, people who didn't like that kept saying, oh, you don't have the money to do this, and it's a pandemic, and the economy's in the tank, and you can't afford this. But we said, we can't afford not to do this, because we needed to send that signal of certainty to, not just to all Alberta companies, but to the entire world, to say, Alberta is dedicated, no matter what, to making sure we have this competitive tax environment. And what happened, folks? Well, we've all seen the results. Businesses have flocked to Alberta. Businesses that were already here have increased in size. They've been investing and hiring and growing. And as a result, we're collecting more in corporate income taxes today with a lower rate, a 33% lower rate, than we ever did before. And so I think that just sort of builds on what Rick was saying, is that we are focused. You know, yes, there can always be questions about subsidies. And we know that Ottawa does that really well, giving Alberta dollars out to Eastern Canadian companies. But we believe the best thing we can do, and the first thing we should do, is have the most competitive tax environment, because every Albertan and every Alberta business has an equal opportunity to participate in that low rate of taxation. And it rewards those folks who take good, wise risks, who put their capital to work and who have success. Then they keep more money in their pocket and they can reinvest that and continue doing it. That is what has driven Alberta to become an economic powerhouse for generations, and that's going to be our approach as a government, to make sure we maintain that advantage.
So let's sort of stay with that theme, and again, sort of both of you, talk a bit about the advantages that Alberta already has to attract and retain innovation leadership, and this probably gets into education, both K-12 and post-secondary. How do we train here and keep here, and then how do we use that as a tool to attract more of that leadership, not just companies, but leaders in those sectors to Alberta? You have some thoughts?
Sure. Well, there's certainly no one silver bullet to that, and so I may not cover everything, and Rick, you might have some perspectives to add too. It's a combination of things. So I think the talent is a big piece, right? Like even when I was at BC, that was the #1 challenge when I was looking at investing in companies is, well, how are you going to make sure you have the right talent to scale? And I think we've come light years since I left being a VC, and over the last 4.5 years in government, we've been able to create a ton of new spaces in our post-secondary institutions to focus on those careers that are highest in demand, and a lot of those are in the tech space, a lot of those are in healthcare, and a couple other spaces. But we know that we need to have homegrown talent here in Alberta. We have some outstanding post-secondary institutions, some outstanding professors, especially in our computer science programs and a lot of our technology-related programs. And we need to get more students going through those programs and coming out with their certifications and entering the workforce right here in Alberta. Because we know there will be something for them to do when they come out the other side. And so I think, we, in the last year or two, committed well over $170 million to create about 10,000 new spaces in our post-secondary institutions in those areas of highest demand. And that's just going to help us to keep building a much larger pool of talent every single year thereafter. But part of it, too, is also then saying, well, there's a bit of a need in some of that early stage venture capital space. There have been, if you look back at 2017, for example, there was only $30 million of venture capital investment going to Alberta companies. And that's a really small number. And some of that was my company's investments, by the way. But where are we now? We're at $729 million last year alone. That's almost, well, that's exponential growth. And one of the things that has helped that has been our commitment to continuing the operation of Alberta Enterprise Corporation, not to be confused with Alberta Enterprise Group. So for those of you who don't know, that's our venture capital fund of funds. And so the thought process there is, well, we're not good at investing directly. As a government, we shouldn't be investing directly in companies. We're not good at that. But we know that there's a gap of venture investment coming to Alberta tech companies. So how do we try and navigate that? So we put a pool of money. Well, originally it was the PC government, and then the NDP recapitalized it when they were in power, and then we recapitalized it again after we formed government in 2019. And good news, we've committed again to recapitalize it over the next 3 years with an additional $100 million. So what do they do with that? They go out and say, well, who are all the best venture capital firms out, not just in Alberta, but all across the marketplace? Who's really good at clean tech? Who's really good at enterprise software? Who's good at traditional energy stuff? Who's good at fintech? Who's good at life sciences? And who has a track record of delivering extremely good results for their investors? And then the next time they're going to raise a fund, let's invest in them, because they have that track record. We could never build a talent pool of expertise in the VC space internal to government to go and replicate what is already being done by the best of the best in the private sector. So instead, through AEC, we're investing in those venture funds. And we have one condition with that money. Well, two conditions. One is your number one objective is make money, right? There's no other policy objective of like go and create, go and give a grant to something before it's investable. No, this is all about investing in investable companies who are going to deliver a return. But number two, we say you have to have an office in Alberta. If you're not an Alberta fund, that's okay, but you have to have an office here, you have to have a partner here. Because we know in the venture space, VCs invest in their backyard. And if you're located here, you have people here, you're going to look at deals here. And then you're going to see the great deals that are in Alberta, led by Alberta entrepreneurs and innovators. And you're going to cut checks to them because they're so great. And that hypothesis has proven to be successful because for every dollar that AEC has invested into a venture fund, even the ones outside of Alberta, that has brought $5 back into Alberta tech companies. So if we have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into AEC and they have deployed those into VCs, we're seeing 5x on that investment into Alberta tech companies, but they're going into the best of the best. And those tech companies are going on to become successful and pay off returns. And soon we will be in a position where the returns from those exits will turn Alberta Enterprise Corporation into a self-funding, in perpetuity, economic development and diversification engine, attracting more and more venture capital into Alberta. So those are just two examples of things that we are doing well in Alberta in terms of investing in talent development with our post-secondaries and doubling down on those areas of skills in high demand, and then continuing to double down on Alberta Enterprise Corporation, the venture capital fund of funds model, because it has proven to be one of the most effective economic development and diversification tools in our toolkit. We've got a great team there. They're delivering great results. And the results speak for themselves. $30 million in 2017, $729 million in 2022, And the first quarter of 2023 has been extremely, very exciting. So I believe we have really only scratched the surface of our opportunities in the Alberta tech market.
And to build on those points a little bit, we ask companies when they come into the city to not just invest, but also invest in creating talent. So with AWS, for example, we signed an agreement, and with MRU and with funding for the provincial government, we started training people that Amazon will need next year when they open their data centers. But their first cohort of data scientists actually graduated this spring. So we're a year ahead of where we need to be. AWS this morning announced a new program they're going to run this fall here in Calgary, where they're going to run 2-day courses to create digital, I'll call them digital cable splitters. The reality is now that you are building optical cables, or you're connecting optical cables to provide 5G type services to all of Alberta. You need these specialized technology people that can actually build that equipment. You may remember from high school, when you tied copper cables together, you just tie them together and put some tape on it. Optical cable apparently doesn't work quite that way.
A little more complicated.
A little more complicated. So AWS is going to sponsor a course in the fall. They're going to graduate probably between 100 and 200 people. They don't need that many. When they run this program traditionally in other markets, they've actually ended up people standing outside trying to hire the people once they finish. That is the type of investment that we're asking companies to make to build an ecosystem and go from there.
Yeah.
But let's not forget 2 other points. Number one, we have an amazing quality of life, and housing is affordable here. So if you're trying to attract talent, it's really important that you have those factors. People can't move to Vancouver or Toronto. It's just unaffordable. So we're playing those cards pretty hard all the time. And then secondly, immigration. The government has done some great work on getting streamlined immigration into the province. And it's one of the things that's driving companies like Emphasis, and some other ones that we're going to be announcing this fall into Calgary and into the province in general. Because at the end of the day, if you can bring talent in quickly from overseas or from within North America, that is helpful. And we've just announced some of the best immigration numbers into Alberta, both on a provincial basis as well as from outside of Canada. And that's one of the drivers of how we attract more talent so that companies can employ more people.
Kelly, we need to honor Kelly and Karen with their wedding anniversary. We're going to do a switch. So Kelly is going to go off. I know.
I'd be fired.
Kelly is now leaving to be with his beautiful wife. Bye, Kelly.
Bye.
All as well.
Okay.
So I've checked with the colleagues. We're going to go till 6:15. We're now going to welcome Shondell Sabad, who is also an AEG member, who is also co-founder of Prairie Vertical Farms. So Shondell is going to get mic'd up, and then we'll take the questions from there. Only till 6:15, okay? And I understand Minister Glubish is here till 6:30, so maybe you might have some one-on-one after that. Thank you.
So while we're waiting for the mic, just to build on what you were saying, right? I think one of the things that really is putting Alberta's tech industry at an advantage is the fact that Invest Alberta, which we started in 2019 as a government, is going out and actively hunting strategic additions to our tech ecosystem. They're going out all around the world and saying, who are some of the best and the brightest tech companies and entrepreneurs and innovators who have great IP, and how do we convince them to come here? And let's show them that we have that get or done attitude, that can-do attitude, the best tax environment, and so many other advantages. And just going out and selling Alberta. It's simple, folks, right? Like in a business, what's the most important thing for you to do? Get out in front of your customers. Go and sell what you do best and tell people why you're the best at what you do. Well, in Alberta, we believe we're the best at so many things, and we're going to get out there and tell that story. And Invest Alberta is a big part of how we as a government are doing that. And so when we can go and convince Amazon to come and spend $4.1 billion to build a data center just outside of Calgary, that's a huge win. But we don't stop there. Then we upsell. We're like, hey, invest in this talent training program and do this and do that. So it's a credit to the vision of our team to say we are going to be extremely entrepreneurial in how we think about how we build a future for Alberta that we can all be proud of, be excited about, and participate in the upside. So I hope you're excited, folks, because we're just scratching the surface of the power and possibilities of what our tech sector is going to unlock for all the benefit of all Albertans.
And I'm going to use a non-tech example, just to give you an example of how we work together with government. So a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, Dow Chemicals was planning to build a net zero plant, either in Louisiana or Alberta. And this chairman of Dow called our premier one day and said, sorry, you lost. You're not going to get this deal. And the team said, oh, no, we're not walking away from this deal. What if we come down and meet with your board and the chairperson and talk a little bit about how we could move this business forward? So finance minister, premier, and my predecessor flew down on one of their jets and met with the board on a Sunday. And the board said, you know, we like you, we like Canada, it's more stable. They know that the Dow plant's here doing very well from a productivity and perspective because we've got great team members who work with it. But Louisiana was just writing checks left, right, and center. It's a really tough challenge. But we figured out that if we could make a change in our depreciation laws, so not give up money for Alberta, but just give up timing of when we would receive money, we could still win the deal. So we said to the chairman of Dow, what if we rewrite the legislation? Will you give us the deal? He said, yeah. And so we asked him, well, how long can we have to kind of do that? He says, well, you're governor. So you can take 6 months. We don't, 6 months would be great. Premier Finance Minister and my predecessor flew back on Sunday night, wrote the legislation on the plane. Monday we put it into the legislature. Second reading on Tuesday, third reading on Wednesday, declared it into law on Thursday, went back down to Louisiana and signed the deal on Friday. You know, the Dow chairman tells the story about these crazy Albertans. He has never seen anything like that. When we tell that story around the world, people actually applaud because they think Alberta or Canada in general or North America is slow. We're not. We can marshal resources from government when we need to move views forward quickly. That's how we win, not only in energy and clean tech, but also in technology as we move forward.
Yeah, that's a great segue to the next question on the list here, which is, please elaborate on Alberta's rural technology strategy.
Sure. Well, as I said earlier, like technology is the future of every industry, and that means no matter where you are in Alberta, whatever it is that you're doing, technology matters to that. And I think one of the things that we all can relate to is that if technology is the future of every industry, well, connectivity is the lifeblood of technology. You can't do much with technology if you're not connected to the rest of the world, if you're not connected to the internet, if you can't communicate. And we can all relate to times when we've been in a smaller town or a smaller community in Alberta, or even across Canada, it's not unique to Alberta, where the internet connections were awful. We can all relate to that, right? Like, I'm seeing some heads nodding. And so that's why a cornerstone of our plan in that regard is the Alberta Broadband Strategy, which I developed earlier in my time at Service Alberta, and I've carried that with me. We launched that a year and a half ago. I think it was budget 2022. And that included a $390 million commitment over 4 years, which also then was, we negotiated a match from the federal government to do dollar for dollar. So that's a total of $780 million to go towards building and expanding connectivity infrastructure all across the province. We are committed to ensuring that every Albertan and Alberta business, no matter where they reside, will have access to reliable, high-speed internet. And that's our financial commitment. And our strategic commitment is all outlined in the Alberta Broadband Strategy. So if you're looking for more details on that, please go check that out on the Alberta government website. But it's something I'm really proud of because if you look at the last 10 years before I became an MLA, there was nobody talking about broadband, nobody talking about high-speed internet in government, and certainly no funding for it. And so in my first term, I was able to kind of turn things around, get people to realize, hey, this is important. We need to make sure that we're competitive and that rural Albertans can fully participate in the global economy and work in any industry. And connectivity is the way to make that happen. And to even the playing field across rural and urban Alberta. And so we're putting our money where our mouth is. We've made an outstanding financial commitment. We've been able to bring the feds to the table. And really excited that now that we finally got all that policy work done, we got the strategy finalized, we've got a game plan on how we want to do this, we've got the money approved, and now we've been working with the feds on looking at hundreds and hundreds of applications from different proponents from all across the province, and some really exciting projects. So I think now over the next couple of years, you're going to start to see an enormous amount of that investment being announced and distributed, and shovels in the ground, and infrastructure being built, and that's going to be a game changer for all of the rural communities all across the province.
Great, thanks for that answer. Maybe a question for Rick. Rick, when you travel the world, and you talk to investors in different countries,
Where in the world are you most surprised about people who have interest in Alberta? Like, we know the States, we know the UK, we know Europe, but maybe some of those Asian or African countries, do some of those countries surprise you when they talk to you about we'd love to be in Alberta?
Absolutely, and some of the places that are most surprising are Korea and Japan, because they just want more of Alberta, both in terms of energy and food and all of the other services we provide. And their trading houses, we're having some really interesting discussions with about how we move technology forward, how we move hydrogen forward. And they don't get too hung up on some of the other challenges that we see in some of the rest of the world. The other interesting spaces for us are some of the smaller countries in both Europe and even further away. So I was in Israel 4 weeks ago, a hotbed for innovation and how the economic development is there in partnership. The Israelis are really interested in doing things with Alberta. The same with Ireland, the same with some of the other smaller countries, Denmark. We were there just after the minister. We're doing some work with them, and we had a delegation of 40 companies come to Edmonton a couple months ago to talk about green and blue hydrogen. And what we're finding, we're calling it our blue ocean, red ocean strategy. Everyone wants to go to the US, Germany, and all the big places. We're thinking that we can have more of an impact as an organization by going to a smaller market and then copying from there. So for us, it's about being really targeted. The minister mentioned that a little bit earlier. We don't want to be all things to all people. In most countries, we're only interested in talking to 20 or 25 companies at best, and they're very targeted who we want to talk to. One of the interesting challenges that has come out of COVID that we haven't really thought about, but that is resonating with people is, it used to be you take energy out of Alberta, move it overseas, produce something, and then ship the product back to North America. Well, how did that work for you during COVID? It didn't. So we're having some really interesting discussions, and we'll be making some announcements this fall with large companies in both Asia and Germany who are now saying, hey, we should locate some of the stuff in, what do you call it, nearshoring, friendshoring, offshoring, whatever you want to call it. We should put that into North America. And Alberta ranks really high, and that's why we were announcing this morning's investment, simply because people are realizing that they got to replace capacity around the world. So it's not necessarily about specific countries, it's more about specific industries that we're talking about.
Great, thanks for that. We're going to tackle a big issue now. It's a question for both of you from Shane, so thanks, Shane. What plans, and this is both from the government attracting, and building out their services, but also from investors throughout the world who may have better ideas on how to provide this service. What plans do you have for tech improvements that could benefit the delivery of Alberta health services?
Well, this kind of ties into some of my earlier comments about being smart about how we use data. So the Alberta government is really good at gathering, storing, and securing large quantities of data. We're government after all. But we've always worn that hat of like, we've got to secure it and protect it, and that is important. But then it sort of stopped there. And for me, I'm thinking, well, we have this enormous quantity of data that would be a treasure trove for research and the development of new tools and technologies. If we could just get the right minds to look at it and to analyze it and to build models off of it and apply different AI algorithms and figure out what conclusions can we draw from here. If Circle Cardiovascular Imaging, the company I referenced earlier, can build a $250 million company by just using scan data of cardiac conditions and then equip cardiologists with the tool that can revolutionize how they take care of patients. Now imagine, there's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of applications within our healthcare system where similar innovations could be developed, but you need the data. And so one of the things that we're really working on now is to try and say, okay, how do we bring about a framework that will allow that innovation to happen in a safe and secure way, in a way that is built around privacy by design principles, because we don't want to in any way, shape, or form compromise privacy of Albertans. But if we can figure out the right ways to define de-identification of data, anonymization principles, some of you might have heard the terms of synthetic data. If you don't know what that is and you're curious, come talk to me afterwards. But the fact is, there are ways to completely anonymize data sets without compromising the value in those data sets to provide information so that you can develop new technologies on it and come up with some really innovative tools based on it. But right now, our policy framework stands in the way and says, unless you are HS, you cannot look at this.
Yeah.
Well, that is a huge obstacle to some revolutionary innovations in our healthcare system. And so in the same spirit, the can-do spirit, the get-her-done spirit, we're working on trying to figure out how do we work closely with the Privacy Commissioner, whose job it is to represent the interests of Albertans from a privacy perspective. How do we invite their feedback? How do we look at what other jurisdictions have done well and done poorly and learn from all of that? And then how do we work with researchers and innovators and academics and entrepreneurs and innovators to say, what would you want to try and do if you could? And then try and figure out the right way to discern like a happy medium in there so that you have a way to say, we will innovate, we will do it together, we will not leave this data resource untapped and just a potential, but we will turn it into real solutions. That is really what is going to help to transform our healthcare system. It's going to take some time, so I ask for your patience, but just know like, this is one of the things that gets me up in the morning and gets me excited to go to work, is if we can figure this out in the next couple of years, because we have all of our health data in one health system with AHS, we actually have a globally attractive resource in that data. And you would have the best and the brightest minds in medical technology from around the world choosing to come to Alberta and building IP in this space in Alberta if we get this right. And I believe if we do that well, then over the next 10 to 15 years, that technology sector is going to be as big as our oil and gas sector.
Excellent, excellent. And now, Rick, that's a big toolbox to be able to work with to go to places like Israel and some of these other places in the world that are innovating in healthcare. You know, perhaps you can give us your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I'm going to step out of the healthcare sector for a moment and just talk about some things that we're working on. We just hosted the ambassador from Denmark here for the third time. And in Denmark, you could file your tax returns online in less than 10 minutes. And the government actually populates the data for you. So the minister was talking about this a little bit earlier. Government already has the data. How do we push that out into the system so that you and I don't have to sit there for a couple hours and fill out dumb forms and collect data? So for us, you know, I'm on the same page with the ministers on. We get continuous demand from companies who say, hey, you have a really amazing healthcare data system. You're one of the few locations in the world where you actually have 4.5 million health records. How can we innovate with you and work on that together? Minister and I have to do some work on that in the next little while, but there is an amazing attraction for that. And Israel, where we were a couple weeks ago, is one of those countries that wants to do that. So we got to just connect, and that's our role at Invest Alberta, right? At the end of the day, it's connecting those investors to what's already here and putting that together. That's really what we're focused on.
Just to build, because you touched on a really, I want to go back to the comment you mentioned about being able to automatically file your tax returns. But think about it, if you are someone who just has a T4, well, the government has your T4 too. They have all that information. So if you don't have any other sources of revenue, you don't have any other deductions, why can't you just go log in to your Alberta government account, prove who you are, and just say, I want to file my tax return. It auto-populates and you say, is this everything about me that I need to disclose? If yes, certify and you're done. You can do it in one click.
Yeah.
And so I was just talking to some of the folks who helped build the digital government systems that is being used in Estonia. They have an office here in Calgary, and I was just talking to them today. And they were telling me about how they built that like one-click filing of your taxes for anyone who's got like a really simple system. And now that doesn't help everybody, but it actually is a very large segment of the population who that's all they need.
Yeah.
So imagine how much easier your life will be if all you got to do is just go on your mobile phone, log in with your ID and your online account, say, I'm filing my taxes today, auto-populates everything you need, and you're done. That's going to save tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in accounting fees for Albertans. It's going to save them enormous amounts of time and stress. It's going to allow them to file right away instead of waiting until the end of April because they forgot about it. And that's just one example of how we can automate something that everybody in Alberta has to do at some point in the year, and just using technology to make it easier. And the more we do that for Albertans, but also for Alberta businesses, the more people are going to want to be here. And the more the rest of the world is going to take note. People already go to Estonia to go and learn about what they've done to be one of the most digital governments in the world. And it's a great story. It's a really fascinating story. I'd encourage you to check it out if you have time sometime. We're trying to learn from them and from other leaders from around the world because we want to make sure that 5 years from now, after we've had some time to get caught up, that people around the world are actually saying, hey, Estonia's awesome, the UK's awesome, Alberta's awesome.
Yeah.
And we want people to say Alberta in the same breath as mentioning some of these other world leaders. And we can do it, folks, because we've got that can-do attitude, we've got the resources, we've got the political will. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Premier Smith created this Department of Technology and Innovation in the first place is I got her excited about this stuff, and I said, hey, if only I could focus on just these things, imagine what we can do. And that's what we're doing now, and we're not going to take no for an answer, folks. We're going to deliver.
Good.
I love it. Alrighty, well, I think I know what we have to go. So